Greetings, Year 9 students. Today we're looking at exercise 8H, and we're going to take everything we've learnt in previous exercises and put it together with some fractions. Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Let's get into it. Now, the first thing we need to do here, and I've got it highlighted in green, whenever we can, we're going to factorise first. Always factorise. We'll worry about anything else later. Factorise first, the important part. Now, we have looked at 5 different ways of factorising so far in the last few weeks. The most important one to consider is this one. If you can, take out a common factor. Once you've taken out a common factor, that might be as far as you can go, or you might have a bracket that is a difference of 2 squares. You might end up with grouping in pairs question. Not likely with that one. You could end up with a monic quadratic trinomial or a non-monic quadratic trinomial after you've taken out a common factor. Always do that first if you can. Sometimes you can't take out a common factor and it's just going to be one of these 4 types of questions. So we have to be able to factorise first. We're going to then worry about what we can do later after that. Let's get into our first question. We need to factorise first. Well, whenever you have a fraction, the idea is to treat the top of the fraction and the bottom of the fraction as separate questions. Let's look at the top of the fraction. Can you factorise minus 30? Well, it's just a number. You can't do anything with it. So we leave it as minus 30. But the bottom of the fraction, that can be factorised. So the minus 30 stays on the top. The bottom of the fraction, 5 goes into 15 and 5 goes into 20. So I've taken out 5 as a common factor and I leave a set of brackets. Now 5 goes into 15 3 times, 5 goes into 20 4 times, so I'm going to end up with 3a plus 4 in the bracket. Once you've taken out the common factors and factorised as far as you can go, then we worry about what we do next. And what we do next is we look at it and we go, well, this is a fraction. On the top of the fraction there's a 30. On the bottom of the fraction there's the number 5. I know that 5 goes into 5 and 5 goes into 30. So I'm going to go 5 goes into itself once, 5 goes into 30 6 times, and that leaves me with an answer of negative 6 over 1 multiplied by 3a plus 4. Now that's actually not the way we want to write it, and you don't have to write that line of working there. You can go straight to just negative 6 over 3a plus 4, and we don't even need to put the brackets around this 3a plus 4 because there was a 1 in front of it, and that means you don't need the bracket unless there were other parts, and there's not. So that looks messy, but it is a simplified version of the question as it began. Let's try another one. Part B, we need to factorise first. So look at the top of the fraction, look at the bottom of the fraction as separate questions. On the top of the fraction, I've got a 20 and a 30. 10 go into both of those. On the bottom of the fraction, I have a 6 and a 9. 3 goes into 6, 3 goes into 9. I'm not looking for a number that goes into everything on the top and the bottom. I'm treating the top of the question as a separate question. The top of the fraction as a separate question, and the bottom of the fraction as a separate question. So on the top of the fraction only, 10 goes into 20 and 30, 10 goes into 20 twice, 10 goes into 33 times, so I'm left with 2a plus 3. On the bottom of the fraction, we said 3 is common. 3 goes into 6 twice, 3 goes into 9 3 times, so I'm left with 2a plus 3. Once you've finished factorising, then you look and worry about what's going to happen next. Now I have a fraction. And on this fraction, I have common brackets, so the common brackets will cancel. They go into each other once, but I'm now just left with 10 over 3. That's my final solution. That's simplified. Now, that is the original question. It actually cancels down to 10 over 3, which is much simpler. Let's try part C. Let's factorise first. Well, you've got fractions everywhere here. For this first fraction, on the top it's already factorised because factorise means put into bracketed form. The bottom won't factorise, there's nothing common. For the second fraction, the top doesn't factorise because it's just the number 2. The bottom's already factorised, so I don't have to factorise first because this question was factorised. What I now have to look at is, does anything cancel? Well, when I look at this question, you can imagine, because there's nothing else there, that the a plus 2 on the bottom is in brackets. So the a plus 2 and the a plus 2 there, top and bottom, identical brackets, they cancel. You can also see a 2a take 5 and a 2a take 5, top and bottom. You can do that when there's a time sign. They will cancel. What are we left with? 2 and a take 2. And you'll notice that the a take 2, because there's nothing else left on the bottom, I don't have to put the brackets there. If you want to, that's fine. But there is my simplified answer. Let's look at part D. Everything's simplified because it's already in bracketed form. But this question's a little bit trickier because there is a divided by sign. And remember, when you're doing fractions, you change the divided by sign to a multiplication sign, and whatever is after it gets flipped or turned upside down. So this question is now, the first part stays the same. This divided by sign changes to a multiplication sign, and this part here got flipped. So they swapped. Now I'm just looking for common things because everything's factorised. There's an x take 3 bracket, there's an x take 3 bracket on the top and bottom, they cancel. There's x plus 5 brackets, they cancel. Does anything else cancel? No. So on the top I've got an x take 2 bracket, on the bottom I've got x and a 5 that are being times together, and x times 5 is 5x. On the top I have x take 2. Do I need the bracket? No, I could just write x take 2 over 5x. And that would be your final answer. If you left it like this, that's fine. You'd still get full marks. Let's look at the next part. Now, when we started this, I said factorise first. This is a fraction. Do the top of the fraction and the bottom of the fraction as 2 separate questions. So, let's put our fraction there. On the top, this is a monic quadratic trinomial. So I'm trying to get 2 numbers at times to give minus 8 and add to give minus 7. So what numbers times to give negative 8 and add to give negative 7? Well, there's negative 8 and plus 1. Negative 8 plus 1. They times to give minus 8. They add to give minus 7. So they're the numbers I put in the brackets. On the bottom, I'm now looking at this part. I need, because it's a monic quadratic, I need numbers at times to give 2 and add to give 3. Well, that'd be 2 and 1 because 2 times 1 is 2 and 2 plus 1 is 3. So 2 and 1. Now I've finished all the factorising, and you notice I didn't write much about how I factorised. I just factorised because they were the simpler ones. The a plus 1s are the same. They will cancel each other out. I'm left with a take 8 over a plus 2. Do I need to put the brackets on? No, I could just write a take 8 over a plus 2 without the brackets because there's nothing else with it. And that's your final answer. Let's try part F. A fraction. Do the top of the fraction and the bottom of the fraction as separate questions. So let's rewrite this. On the top, that's a special type of question that we're dealing with there. If I said m squared take 25, I'd say that's a difference of 2 squares. Each bracket begins with an m. Each bracket, 5 times 5 is 25. There's my factorised version of m squared take 25. So that is what I'm going to put in on the top. There's my m plus 5, there's my m take 5 from factorising m squared take 25. On the bottom, I have m squared minus 3m minus 10. So I'm actually chasing, this is a simple monic quadratic, I'm chasing numbers that times to give minus 10 and add to give minus 3. Times to give minus 10, add to give minus 3. That would be minus 5 and 2, because they times to give minus 10 and they add to give minus 3. So I'd have m take 5 and m plus 2, or I'd have m plus 2 and m take 5. The order doesn't matter. So there's my m plus 2 and m take 5. I've written it in that order. It doesn't matter what order it is. But now that I've done that, I look to see what factorizes. There's an m plus 5 and an m take 5. Oh, hang on, m take 5, m take 5. That's what I want. They are identical. They will cancel. I'm left with m plus 5 over m plus 2. Now there's a mistake there. I need to go fix that. That's an m plus 5 over m plus 2. Do you need the brackets? No. So you could actually write equals m plus 5 over m plus 2. And that's your final solution. If you left it with the brackets, that's also fine. Let's try another one. Factorize first. Now because there's two fractions, I've got to factorize the top of the first fraction, the bottom of the first fraction. I've got to factorize the top of the second fraction, the bottom of the second fraction if I can. Always factorize first. Ask questions later. So let's go through the process. For the top of the first fraction, 3 goes into 3, 3 goes into 6, so I'll take out 3 as a common factor. 3 goes into itself once, 3 goes into 6 twice, so I'm going to get 1x, or just x plus 2. Let's look at the bottom of the first fraction. 2 goes into itself, 2 goes into 6, so I'll take out 2 as a common factor. 2 goes into itself once, so I'll be left with just the x. 2 goes into 6 3 times, so that's x take 3. Let's go to the second fraction. I'm looking at the top of the second fraction. What goes into 8 that also goes into 24? 8 does. 8 goes into itself, 8 goes into 24. So I'll take out 8 as a common factor. 8 goes into itself once, 8 goes into 24 3 times, so I'll have 1x take 3. On the bottom of the second fraction, x plus 3 doesn't have anything common, or does have 1 if you want. So I'm just going to put it in brackets. If you wanted to, you could put a 1 there, but there's not required because it's not going to cancel anything. Let's look, are there any common brackets that I can now cancel? Because there's a times sign here, I can do that. X take 3 cancels with x take 3, so there's brackets that are cancelling. But there's a number 2 and a number 8. They can also cancel. So let's cancel the brackets first. Number 2, 2 goes into itself once, 2 goes into 8 4 times. Let's see what's left over. On the top, I have a 3 and a 4. Numbers 3 and numbers 4 times to give 12, and then I have that bracket. And on the bottom, I just have x plus 3 in brackets. You could put a 1 in front, but because it's just x plus 3 in brackets with nothing else other than a 1 in front, I don't need to worry about the bracket on the bottom. There is your final answer. Hopefully you're starting to get the idea of factorize first, then try and cancel. Don't try and look at this question and go, oh, 6's cancel, 3's cancel. That's not going to work because all of these pluses and minus signs. Let's try this one. Factorize first. So what I'm going to do, before I factorize, I know I'm going to change that divided by sign to a times sign and turn this upside down. So I'll turn it upside down to make it a times question. Now let's factorize everything. For the first fraction, a squared take 4. That's a difference of 2 squares. It will go to 2 brackets. Each bracket will have a plus and a minus. They'll start with a's. 2 times 2 is 4, so I'll end up with plus 2 and minus 2. I'm not going to factorize 25 because it can't be factorized. It's just 25. This fraction here, take out a common factor of 5. 5 goes into itself once, so you'll get 5 and a plus 1 because 5 goes into itself once. The bottom, that's a monic quadratic trinomial. So I'm looking for numbers at times to give minus 2 and add to give minus 1. So I want numbers at times to give minus 2 and add to give minus 1. Well, that would have to be 1 and 2, and I'm going to make the 2 negative and the 1 positive. Let's check them. If I times 1 and negative 2, they'll times to give negative 2. 1 added to minus 2 will give minus 1. They're the numbers I want. So my brackets are going to become a plus 1 and a take 2. Order doesn't matter. Now that I've factorized everything and I've fixed up the divided by sign, I can just look for common brackets. I know that some of these brackets will cancel. So the a plus 1s knock each other out. The a take 2s knock each other out. What am I left with? Hang on, before I take anything else, I've got a 25 and a 5. 5 goes into itself once. 5 goes into 25 5 times, so I can cancel those. Now on the top, I have a plus 2 in brackets. That's gone, that's gone, that's a 1, I don't have to worry about it. I've just got a plus 2 over 5. So I don't need to worry about the bracket on the a plus 2 because there was nothing else on the top. There's your final solution for that one. Hopefully, you're starting to feel a little more confident. It's taking everything we've done in previous exercises and putting it all mixed into these fractional questions. Time for you to try some questions. Enjoy the experience.